Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's presentation, Flowers, Food, and the Future, Why Pollinators Matter, is brought to you by NatHab Expedition Leader Eric Ramirez. Eric studied marine biology in La Paz, Baja California Sur, where he spent over 2 years researching the feeding habits of several shark species and gained hands-on field experience before working in a genetics lab. He transitioned to science communication and spent 5 years as a naturalist guide leading marine tours in the Sea of Cortez. Eric now also leads monarch butterfly expeditions in the high altitude forests of central Mexico, combining his marine biology expertise with his passion for connecting people to extraordinary wildlife migrations. Eric, thank you so much for joining us here today. The show is yours. Take it away, my friend.
Rob, come on. Again, it was an incredible presentation. I'm very honored to be here back again in this webinar section. As you said, Rob, I'm a marine biologist, and you might wonder, Eric, what is a marine biologist talking about? Flowers, food, and pollinators? I know that this is not my realm of expertise, but I like to know more about things, especially things that I don't know that much. That's why I decided to bring this topic. So, Robert, you already mentioned my bio. That was fantastic. But also, I want to tell you that I'm a person who loves to experience nature in the most simplest way, which is outside, sitting under a tree, or just contemplating multiple monarch butterflies around me. To be honest, I conceived the world in a way that we are deeply connected. As a matter of fact, on my last webinar, if you didn't see it, I talk about symbiosis in nature, relationships. I also said that all the animals, all the plants, the microbes, everything is deeply connected, and we cannot conceive organisms isolated because we live in this huge world where everything has a very small or very large connection, which enables us to survive and thrive through the history of life. So that's why today I brought this topic about pollinators, and we're gonna start with this. We're gonna define what is the meaning of pollination. Then we're gonna go over to check what kind of pollinations do we know, because I understand that in the moment that we think about pollination, our brains are linked directly to bees, because bees are the most important pollinators in the world. But we have lots of different animals which also share this incredible job in nature. Also, we're going to talk about the importance of pollinators in the ecosystem and in agricultural affairs. And we're going to discuss a little bit if the population of pollinators are in huge decline, and if it do so, what are the causes of these events? And at the end, we're just going to discuss about conservation and future directions of pollinators. So I have a question. You don't have to answer yet, but do you know how your favorite first travel before reaching you is very interesting, because every time I got to the supermarket and I grab the kiwis or apples, before I get them, I think like, wow, I mean, right now I have an apple in my hand, but do I know the incredible value of this apple? Like, who was producing this apple? The farmers and the people transporting this, but who else is behind the scenes? I know we all love apples, almonds, avocados, kiwis, blueberries, mangoes, cantaloupes, name them. There's a huge, incredible machinery working behind the scenes in order to provide these incredible fruits from the earth. So now I want to ask the audience, what is pollination for you? So friends, if you want to type down your answer, Rob is going to read your answers for me, because I really want to know if you have any idea of what is pollination.
So, folks, if you do have an idea, please go ahead and click on the control panel. That's those three lines in the upper right-hand corner. Click on those, go down to where it says questions, and put your answer in there. What is pollination? So let's hope we get some people putting their guesses in there.
Yeah.
Don't be shy. Uh, we reproduction. Uh,
Reproduction.
Pollination is the transfer of pollen from one flower to another.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Do we have any other ideas or guesses that we want to put in there, folks?
Otherwise, that's enough, Robert, for me.
Yeah.
That was great. Yeah. Thank you so much. So I can tell you that with the fanciest ways, fanciest words to describe pollination, using the most sophisticated terms, but for practical purposes, pollination means plants sex, just like that, reproduction. So now I can tell you, according to the USDA, the definition of pollination is the act of transferring pollen grains from the male stamen of a flower to the female pistil. Okay, maybe I'm going too fast. So those structures are basically the sexual organs of the female and the male and the female respectively. So we have here in this picture, we have the stamen, and the stamen has anthers on top and filament in the middle. And then if you see on the left side, we have the pistil, which is the sexual female sexual organ, and then we have the stigma on top, and then we have on the bottom the ovary. Okay, so basically what happened is the anther located on the tip of the stamen produces pollen, which contains the sperma or the reproductive cells of the flower. So the pollen is then carried to the female pistil by a pollination vector. So we have here our pollination vector, our bee, which is taking the tasty nectar that the flowers have, and in exchange is taking the pollen, and then once it goes to another plant, another flower, sorry, it just directly put all this pollen on top of the female organ, which is the pistil, on top of the stigma. So here, once the pollen gets to the part of the pistil called, and on top called stigma, it will germinate and grow a tiny tube down to the ovary. This is the pollen tube. This pollen tube carries the sperma to meet the ovule inside of the ovary. Then the sperma fertilize the ovule and it develops into an embryo, which is stored in a capsule. We call that final form the seed. That's it. That's pollination. So then we have the process of fertilization, which I already described it, and then we have germination, but those processes are not going to be mentioned in this presentation because it will be like 2 hours at least, okay? But that's pollination. So we have two types of pollination. Normally, like a lot of like all the plants, most of the plants, to be more precise, they have to be pollinated. There are others which are not. But if the pollen from another anther is deposited on the stigma of the same flower or another flower on the same individual plant, we call this self-pollination. But what happens if we have other organisms or other vectors who are involved in this? We'll call it cross-pollination, and that means that the pollen is going to be transferred from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower on a different individual plant of the same species. Okay, so generally speaking, cross-pollination yields healthier plants. It decreases the risk associated with inbreeding and increases genetic variation. And cross-pollination allows for the formation of different varieties, which can create stronger, more resilient, healthier, adaptable strains. Okay, so if we focus in cross-pollination, we see that we have three important vectors which are going to transport all this pollen. So first of all, we have the wind. Few species of plants, mostly conifers, release their pollen so the wind can take it into the stigma and of other flowers. The pollen of these plants generally is produced in higher amounts to increase the pollination success, and it's lightweight in comparison with other type of pollen. The trees produce flowers at the beginning of the spring before the leaves spread out, so they don't intervene on the pollination process. And then we have the water. This is least common. Only aquatic plants are pollinated by water. And basically, this is very simple. They release the pollen in the water, and the pollen is in charge, the water is in charge to take this pollen to other aquatic plants. And then we have one of the most important, animals. Pollination by animals is actually unintended side effect. Why? Because most of the time, animals are looking for shelter, mate, food, or nest building materials. Plants have evolved many intricate methods for attracting animals. These methods include visual cues, scent, food, mimicry, and entrapment. Flowering plants and their animal pollinators have co-evolved, where the forces of natural selection on each has resulted in changes in their structure, adaptations that increase their dependency on one another. So this is the first time that we listen the term coevolution. Coevolution means two different species are interacting together, and the pressure of one is obligating the other one to also changing behavior, changing structures, changing forms, changing many things, and they're evolving side by side in order to perfect this incredible and solid relationship that they have. So who are responsible of the food on our tables? That's a really good question, because I love food. I assume that you all food lovers. So the answer is very simple. Remember about the definition of pollination? Yeah, so basically pollinators are the stewards of this process. All the organisms in charge of the transportation of pollen from one flower to another are pollinators. And pollinators and plants share one of the oldest partnerships on Earth, over 130 million years of teamwork. Across all this time, they've perfected a truly remarkable mutualistic relationship, another different term. Remember that I told you about symbiosis, relationship in nature? Mutualism is one of the most important symbiosis nature, and that means that one species is getting something from the other, and in exchange, the other one is also something given back. So they both get benefits from this relationship. So plants really rely on pollinators to transfer the pollen from one flower to another, and in return, pollinators are rewarded with rich, nutrient-packed nectar. Sounds very simple, right? A tiny pollen swap for a sweet snack? Yes, it is. But this ancient exchange is far more fascinating and far more important than it first appears. So when people think about pollinators, they picture immediately bees. I said before, but they're only part of the story. Pollinators come in all shapes, sizes. Even they work in different time zones. Some work by day, others work at night. And I'll start with butterflies. Butterflies are less efficient than bees at moving pollen between plants, but the flowers they visit are usually bright in color, blooming clusters, and provide ample nectar as well as a landing platform for the butterfly. I also need to tell you that butterflies are just these incredible creatures that most of the time during the day are hopping from one flower to another. I'm going to start to describe certain affinities that these pollinators have, because they're not always hopping in the same flowers. Actually, they have certain preference, let's say. And then we have moths. Moths are attracted to nocturnal flowers with pale or white coloring, heavy fragrance, and copious nectar, such as morning glory, tobacco, yucca, and gardenias. Then we have the beetles. Beetles were among the first insects to visit flowers. As such, they are especially important pollinators for ancient species such as magnolias, ginkgos, and spice bush. Beetles prefer flowers that have strong, fruity, spicy, or sweet scents. Okay, as you can see, they have different preferences. So wasps are less familiar as pollinators than their bee counterparts, but some species are indeed essential pollinators. There are around 900 species of fig wasps. For example, most of them are responsible for the pollination of more than around 900 species of figs. So if we have 900 species of wasp and 100 species of figs, that means that there's a high specialization here. They're not pollinating like all the species of figs. They are only choosing one particular species. So it's just impressive the level of specialization in this case. Although birds are not as important as insects, they play a a role in pollinating wildflowers around the world. Flowers that attract birds, especially hummingbirds, tend to be tubular, brightly colored, lightly scented, and built with strong structures where the birds can perch while they're feeding. And then we have one of my favorites, bats. Flowers that are visited by bats are typically open at night, large in size, pale or white color, and very fragrant. Over 300 species of fruit, including mangoes, bananas, guavas, depend on bat pollination. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite species is the lesser long-nosed bat. These are a highly migratory animal, and it's responsible for pollinating several cacti and other important species of plants like agave. So if you like tequila or agave, we should thank these bats because they make the tequila production possible. Now we go over bees. These are among the most important pollinators on the planet, and they evolve alongside the flowers they depend on. With over 20,000 species worldwide, nearly all bees feed on nectar as adults and on pollen and nectar as larvae. As they move from one flower to another, pollen sticks to their bodies and gets transferred along plants to cross-pollinate, as I mentioned before. Yeah. But in the case of the bees, what makes bees super important and super highly efficient is that they have fussy bodies that trap pollen and special pollen baskets in honeybees and bumblebee sites. That's why you see this huge pack, like grains of pollen in the sides of the bees. And for me, this is just pure evolution. Some bee species visit many types of plants, while others have co-evolved to pollinate only one specific type, like bee orchids or certain goldenrods. This incredible diversity shows how essential bees are to keep ecosystem healthy and functioning. So, Eric, do they all pollinate the same plants in the same way? The answer is no. As a matter of fact, plants have developed many different strategies to attract pollinators. Some are more generalist and others are highly specialist. Both strategies have their advantages and disadvantages. Plants have evolved different flowering times that occur throughout the growing season to decrease competition for pollinators and to provide pollinators with a constantly supply of food. From the first hits of worm in late winter through spring and summer until the last call in autumn, flowering plants are available to their pollinators, providing pollen and nectar in exchange for the pollination service. So we have basically different flowers, and flowers are very smart because they have been in a competition throughout the last millions of years, developing different structures, different petals, different colors, opening at night in order to get specialized to attract different pollinators. So remember about the word coevolution. Darwin discovered that there's an orchid and a type of moth that they take this example to the extreme. So when this is a very unique coevolution relationship because this moth, the Sphinx moth, is the only one that is capable to pollinate Darwin's orchid. So when the moth inserts its tongue to drink, it picks up pollen on its head, and when it visits another flower, it pollinates it, perfectly matching on the orchid's structure. This example is one of the most famous of coevolution. The orchid evolved along spore to ensure that only a specific pollinator could reach its nectar. The moth evolved a long proboscis or tongue to feed from such flowers. So, okay, Eric, now pollination is clear, and we know by whom and how it's performed. But come on, we do need to make a whole webinar about this topic. Why should we be all connected to listen about this topic? And the answer is pretty short, but it's really, it's vital because they are crucial in the ecosystem. Of course, all the living creatures that we have in our world play an important role. Many times I got asked by my guest, Eric, first they say, we don't like mosquitoes, we don't like leeches, we don't like cockroaches, we don't like obnoxious animals, we don't like poisonous animals. So Eric, what is their purpose in life? Do they have any important role in the ecosystem? And the answer is yes, because all the living creatures play the most important role in the ecosystem. They take part of the food chain. So they are consumed or they consume other organisms. So that's simple. That's going to be our first answer when people ask us about the importance of pollinators. And then if we want to be more specific with this answer, we can say that if a plant produces seeds, it requires pollination. Flowering plants form the biggest group of seed plants with about 300,000 species around the world. That's 90% of the whole plant kingdom. Almost all these species, all these plants, almost 80%, require pollination to reproduce. Pollination, therefore, is responsible for the ecosystem services these plants contribute to the environment, including carbon sequestration, water purification, biodiversity, and more. I'm going to explain all these services. So, CO2 sequestration. Flowering plants help reduce climate change by using CO2 during photosynthesis and releasing oxygen. That's the most basic principle. This is the most simple thing about photosynthesis. The carbon that absorbed can be stored in the soil, in plant roots, or in tree wood. This process helps lower the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. Without pollination and these plants, CO2 levels will rise faster, temperatures will increase, and oxygen levels will drop, making it harder for life to survive. So, second service, pollination helps plants to grow, and these plants play a big important role in protection of our water and our environment. Plant roots absorb water and keep soil in place, which reduces runoff. This runoff is a major cause of water pollution and helps prevent flooding and erosion. Plants also act like natural filters, cleaning the water as it moves throughout the soil. Additionally, plants are essential to the water cycle through transpiration that release water back into the atmosphere. And this is the effect that we see normally, like fog effect on top of the forest. This is just part of the plant's transpiration, contributing to cloud formation and local rainfall. Thanks to pollination, more plants can grow, helping keep our water clean, our soil healthier, and our climate more stable. And for me, one of the most important is the biodiversity. Biodiversity keeps ecosystems healthy, adaptable, and productive. And pollination is the main force supporting that diversity. While some plants can produce asexually, these plants are genetic clones and offer very limited variety. But without the help of many animals, insects, which depends on flowering plants, everything will disappear, and we will not have this flamboyant, colorful ecosystems, and they will be less healthier and less resilient to many changes. So, what are the economic impact of pollination? Because some people are not convinced at the beginning when we talk about the environmental benefits of pollination. They just want to see numbers. It's just tell me if those things are affecting us or not. So in agriculture, 80% of the leading global food crops and 35% of the global production volumes from crops are dependent upon animal pollination. Pollination isn't just an interesting part of nature. It is essential for life on Earth. And most of the world's food plants depend on animals like I told you, bees, butterflies, birds, bats to help them reproduce. In fact, nearly 80% of all the crop plants that feed us and supply plant-based products rely on animal pollinators. Pollination doesn't just create food, it improves it. When bees and other pollinators visit crops, the result is bigger, tastier fruits, and higher harvests, of course. This service has huge economic value, about $10 billion each year in the United States and more than 3 trillion globally. Many everyday foods depend on pollinators, including fruits, nuts, vegetables, and even crops that give us oils like canola, sunflower, palm oil, and more than 150 major crops in the US alone rely on pollination. And this this reminds me that just a week ago I watched a very incredible documentary about pollination. The name of the documentary is The Pollinators. And personally, I didn't know the way how in US, and I'm sure that this is not only US, also in other countries, the way how people pollinate the crops. Because, for example, almonds, apples, just to mention two huge crops in US, depend upon honeybees. So they are the the beekeepers. What they do is they transport huge like quantities of bees in their hives to these plantations, to the orchards, to the croplands, and they leave the bees, and the bees do their job, and they are traveling around the country just doing this because we have monocrops. We have someone has to pollinate this, and we're using honeybees to do this job. So imagine how incredible the bees are. And actually, honeybees are not considered wild animals anymore. They are considered as domestic animals due to the process of the domestication that we have put on them. So, Eric, are pollinators in a big danger? The answer is unfortunately yes. The combined effect of climate change, habitat loss, pathogen infestations, and pesticides still poses a serious threat to pollinator health and survival. Many people worry about stability of our food systems as more studies suggest that the world's pollinator insects are disappearing. And not only our food, also if we think about like forward, um, our most of our clothes are made out of cotton, and cotton has to be pollinated as well, and also pollinators are pollinating the cotton crops. So without them we wouldn't have many of these clothes that we're wearing right now. um, Pollinators around the world are declining super fast. We just need to check the numbers, and this puts our food supply and natural ecosystems in a huge danger. Just in US, honeybee keepers are losing over 30% of their hives every year. Native pollinators like wild bees and butterflies are doing even worse. About 28% of North America's bumblebees have dropped sharply in numbers, and the rusty patch bumblebee has lost 87% of its historic range, becoming the first bumblebee listed as endangered. Butterflies are also struggling. 90% of the US species are at risk of extinction, including the iconic monarch butterfly, which has declined by 74 to 80%. These declines are caused by habitat loss, pesticide use, climate change, diseases, and changing land use. Um, I'm gonna go over this because it is important that we understand that it's not only just one culprit, which is putting a lot of stress into the pollinators' um, stability in the world. It's the combination of different factors which are entering into a constant circle, which is feedbacking itself over and over and over again. So first of all, climate change. Climate change is affecting everything. It's modifying the cycle of many organisms, including the plants, creating negative cascade effects on the welfare of many pollinators. How? Elevated temperature sends a signal to many plants to flower. Unfortunately, some pollinators like butterflies, bees, or others are not ready to emerge from their overwintering moment or hibernation. Also, it could work all the way around. Remember that I'm a monarch butterfly expedition leader. I've seen in the centers that we visit in Mexico that like very early, like pretty much in February, the last 3 years, the days were so warm that they broke their diapause moment and they start to mate. And people were like, oh yeah, they saw a lot of monarch butterflies, but this is not really good because in the moment that they start to mate, they start to head back to the north. But what happens if they reach these areas and the main important flower, the main important plant that they need to deposit their eggs is not ready yet? Seem like they won't be able to do so, and of course that is going to affect in the long term the populations of monarch butterflies. Habitat loss. As more and more land is developed for agriculture, urban growth, human dwellings, pollinator habitat and nutrition suffer a lot. Bees and other pollinators need a variety of plants to attain a healthy diet. More diversity, more that we have, more options are available for pollinators. Decorative lawns, sprawling parking lots, and agriculture monoculture do not supply that necessary variety. These developments also diminish the ability of suitable nesting sites for ground-dwelling pollinators. And here I'm going to stop a little bit because sometimes we think that what we need to do better is to plant nectaring flowers. We need to supply pollinators with flowers because they need food. Yes, they need food, but you know what else do they need? Places to rest, places to get shelter, places to live, and places to mate. That's why it's also important not to remove everything that is around us. All these pieces of wood, the dead wood, all this piece of the leaf litter, which is under the trees, twigs, and stuff that might appear for us as trash. It's just the best place, the suitable place for pollinators. So one other factor contributing to habitat loss is the spread of invasive plants. In an increasingly connected world, human activities such as trade, again, agriculture, and tourism have translocated much of the world's flora and fauna across geographical space. And the invasion process has complex associations with pollination as well. Pesticides, herbicides, and insecticides also a major threat to pollinators. These chemicals can directly impact the bees, either killing them or negatively affecting their cognitive behavior, fertility, foraging ability, or feeding behavior. And also we have herbicides that they target weeds and wildflowers, which are sources of pollen and nectar for bees and other pollinators. One of the most common and very contaminant pesticides are glyphosate, and now we have neonicotinoids, which affect the nervous system and remain longer in nature. And of course, just the cherry on top of the cake of this problematic situation, we have pathogen infestations. Pollinators are also impacted by unintended consequences of global trade. The introduction of non-native pests and pathogens, like varroa mites, are especially dangerous for honeybees. They are one of the leading causes of death in beehives across the US. And some of these honeybees might face the different pathogens infestations. But what happened, for example, if they have less flowering, nectar flowering plants? What happened, for example, if the temperature is rising? What happened if we remove all the places where they can nest? What happened, for example, if we put a lot of pesticides? Basically, the combination of everything is going to put too much pressure that the populations will not increase. Instead, they will decrease. So what can we do to protect and conserve our pollinators? So increasing the quantity, diversity, and connectivity of habitat where pollinators can eat nectar, pollen, and nest, it's one of the most important things that we can do. For example, planting native wildflowers, flowering strips along field margins, and leaving undisturbed areas for ground nesting bees are the most important thing that we can do. Sometimes we think that all the honey of the bees, they built a hive where the colony is. But as a matter of fact, some species of bees, there are few species of bees who are actually performing this activity. Some of them, they build their nests underground or in dead woods, or they are solitary bees. So also something that we can do is ensuring a season-long bloom of plants. So pollinators have food from early spring to late autumn, and just a change and varied plants. You know, it's interesting. My wife is in La Paz, for example. It's very complicated. I used to live in La Paz. Now I live in Germany. Yeah, just to get you more in context. So here we have a balcony, and my wife was putting she was changing the flowers every single station, just to ensure that we will have nectar and pollen year round. Well, just before winter, of course. In winter, it's very complicated, but that's a good idea that we can do. Protecting nesting over winter in sites, bare ground, dead wood, stems, hedges, especially for wild native pollinators, is also great. Sometimes we see that the things are not pretty nice, and we immediately think that, oh, I have to have the perfect lawn with no weeds, no nothing, and no holes, no dead trees. But this is just killing everything that is inside, things that we cannot see with our naked eyes. Reduce pesticides and chemical risks. Protecting pollinators starts with smart pest management. Use IPM, integrated pest management. Combine natural predators, crop rotation, and careful pest monitoring to minimize pesticide use. Placing some plants which attract natural predators like ladybugs, lacewings, hoverflies, or parasitic wasps is a great option to get rid of mites and other pests. Some species of plants also have natural repellents like marigolds, garlic, peppermint, dill. Also, if you are in a huge need to use the pesticides, at least try to avoid neonicotinoids and opt for biopesticides or low toxicity alternatives with pollinator safe labels. Some pesticides have low negative effects on bees, and others, they have negative effects in other types of insects like butterflies. But for example, we have the Bacillium bacteria like Bacillium thuringiensis, which is very effective for pest control, and it's not super toxic. And this could be also an option that we can use. Kaolin clay or rosemary oil are other type of options, but always check the labels. Apply responsibly, spray only when needed, outside bloom times, during cooler hours, and with measurements to prevent drift or contamination. Communicate and coordinate this. It sounds weird and incredible to believe, but farmers and beekeepers should share information on spraying schedules and hive locations to avoid exposure. In this document that I mentioned, the pollinators, the beekeepers arrived, they left the bees there, and the honeybees were doing their job. And the next day when they came back, you know what happened? It was a cemetery. A lot of bees were dead. And the main reason is because there was not communication, and the farmers, they spread, unfortunately, pesticides 1 day or 2 days before they arrived. And this is super sad. So communication has to be there between farmers and beekeepers. Follow regulations and best practices. Support and implement national pollination protection plans and policies that encourage safer pesticide use. Monitoring, research, and policy frameworks. So protecting pollinators is just about immediate action. This is also very problematic because when we heard that someone is in a big danger, we need to take action immediately. But if we don't stop, we think and evaluate the situation, we might get it wrong. So it's important to understand what are the trends, measuring the progress, and shaping strong policies that ensure the survival for the next generations to come. So monitoring is really important. Track pollinator abundance, diversity, health through the field service and citizen science. Assess habitat quality and pesticide exposure over the time. We need to understand what are the possible consequences of the pesticide exposure in large crops. Use data to evaluate progress and guide conservation actions as well. Research is something that we have to do as a scientist, study the effects of pesticides, diseases, and climate on pollinators, identify resilient species and adaptive traits. We might see that some species are more resilient to the others against these pesticides. Measure the economic value of pollination services and cost benefit of protection strategies. So we have to do a lot of planification before we start to protect and before we take action. Policy frameworks, implement national and international plans like EU pollinator initiative, US pollination strategy, and etc. Stakeholder engagement and education. So effective pollinator protection depends on people as much as it does on policies or scientific tools. Farmers, beekeepers, land managers, gardens, policymakers, business, and the general public play a crucial role in all this incredible moment that we have to change. Engaging and educating these groups ensures that pollinator-friendly practices become a shared responsibility across society. Remember, it is a shared responsibility across society, because most of the time we think, no, the government should implement more policies. No, the companies who are producing the pesticides should take responsibility of their actions. No, the farmers have to do this. And we are pointing people. We need to understand that it's our own responsibility, okay? And then we have to, elaborate campaigns, workshops, and simple actions, guides, empower individuals to take part. We need to work side by side with NGOs, universities, and business, in order to develop different innovative solutions to this problem. I think communication is key. Instead of just working isolated, we should share our work, share the information with the others. So as a human beings, as normal people, you and me, what can we generally do? First of all, plant native flowers. Second, avoid pesticides at home. And if you have to do it, just try to do in a very selective way and try to use biopesticides, which are less toxic to other species of pollinators. Support organic support organic habitat-friendly farmers is also a great idea. You can start to consume things that your local farmers are producing. I know that nowadays these things are very expensive, but in the long run, it's just beneficial for both parties. I also want to say that we need to have a diverse diet. If we all lean into meat, or we all lean into tofu or into vegan options, it's extremes. For me, just my personal opinion, they don't work. Create small pollinator areas. Even balconies help. I told you about our balcony here in Germany. And to be honest, I wasn't too involved into this before, and now I'm getting super excited for the next season to plant different flowers, to plant different um, um, nectar flowers for pollinators. Leave some wild areas, weeds, dead wood, bare soil to pollinators as well. I mean, I understand that this might look untied, but that doesn't matter for nature. Nature needs all these elements in order to survive. And spread awareness. Our word is important. Let's create a ripple effect. Let's tell the others what you have listened today. Let's tell the others what you have learned. Nowadays, there's a lot of information available on internet, and you can have access immediately to this information. There's no excuse to not get informed. So, one last thing. I think that without pollinators, our food supply, our economy, and natural ecosystem will collapse. Protecting them means protecting our future. So I don't want to be negative, but if we continue doing the same things, we might need to start to think about the different options that we're gonna eat, because everything will get more expensive. Everything will be very difficult to access. But if we start to be more intelligent, more empathetic with nature, I think we are in this point that we can still make a change. So just to before I finish, I want to share my social media just in case you want to share something. I like to post things about photography because I'm a photographer, love photography. Also, this is my email. If you have any doubts, if you need more information, I can share to you different web pages. I can also share to you more information. You can also share to me whatever you want, experiences, stories, whatever. I'm an open book, and these are my next not have trips the next year. So just in case you want to see the monarch butterflies, just sign up and we'll be together in the next adventure. So just to finish, I want to tell you something that I wrote yesterday. As part of planet Earth, we are part of a continuous cycle where energy flows from one system to another. Working together is the only way to ensure our survival in this world. Let's strive to balance our actions of giving and taking. And I found this incredible gift that it's a circle, and everything is a circle, is cycle. And this process is repeating again and again and again and again. So thanks a lot. And I hope you like the presentation. And if you have any questions, just please, this is your moment. Thank you.
Eric, thank you so much. So, folks, if you do have questions, feel free to submit them via the question field in your control panel. Just go to the upper right-hand corner of those and put your questions in the question field. So, we're not using pesticides to is a good thing, but how do we protect our bees from predators like Houdini flies, for instance? Is there any natural way that we can help protect them?
I mean, it's interesting because at the end, if it's a natural process, I mean, it's going to happen anyway. I mean, I'm talking about like threats that are created by humans. But for example, if there are animals who are feeding upon the bees, I mean, let's just like let them do their work. Someone has to eat, right? But yeah, that's what I can say, because I know that we all want to protect our organisms, but if they're dying by natural causes, I mean, this is part of the cycle. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Again, if you have a question, please feel free to submit them via the question field in your control panel. We don't have a lot of questions right now, Eric, so I guess I'm going to pass it back to you for any closing comments you may have for us today.
Yeah, I am very happy to live in this world, and what I like to leave to my kids is just a very conscious society that can perfectly work with nature. That's the only thing that I can say.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for taking the time to present this important topic for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in and joined us today. So if you are interested in information on how you can travel to see the Monarchs with NatHab, please give us a call at 800-543-8917, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow. Join us Monday for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out next week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and the replay will be available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We will see you next time.